Hello, welcome to the Haunted Storybook. Before we get to the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Story 1. Clara had always suffered from sleeplessness. Long nights, wide eyes, and the relentless ticking of the clock were familiar companions. When her therapist suggested a weekend in solitude, no phones, no TV, no work, she reluctantly agreed. That's how she ended up at the Grayson house. Nestled far from the main road, the Grayson house was an aging Victorian tucked between two forested hills. The listing said, quaint, but Clara would have chosen, creepy. Shingles were missing from the roof, ivy strangled the fence, and the porch light flickered in a rhythm that seemed almost purposeful. Still, she brought her bag inside, heart thudding louder than she wanted to admit. The living room smelled like cedar and old books. Dust coated everything. An oil painting of a pale woman with dark eyes hung over the fireplace, her gaze following Clara as she passed. "Let's get this over with," Clara muttered, lugging her suitcase upstairs. She chose the second bedroom at the end of the hall, least dusty, least shadowy. A wide window overlooked the forest. The bed creaked as she sat. She laid back and closed her eyes, determined to sleep. But sleep didn't come. Instead, sometime around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hall. And then, her bedroom door creaked open. Clara froze beneath the covers. The sound of the door opening was unmistakable, soft, old hinges groaning under pressure. Her heart pounded in her chest. She held her breath. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voice. Just silence. Slowly, she sat up. "Hello?" she whispered. Her voice cracked. No response. She reached for the flashlight on the nightstand and flicked it on. A pale beam cut through the darkness. The door was open, just a sliver, revealing the faint outline of the hallway. She climbed out of bed, padded across the room, and pushed the door wide. The hallway was empty. But, something felt off. A faint smell drifted through the air, lavender and something older, something damp, like wilted flowers left in a vase too long. Clara stepped into the hall, peering toward the staircase. Nothing moved. Yet when she turned to re-enter her room, she noticed something strange. The rocking chair by the window was moving. Just slightly. Creak. Creak. She hadn't touched it. Suddenly uneasy, she checked the rest of the bedroom. Closet. Empty. Under the bed. Dust and wood. The door to the adjoining bathroom. Locked from the inside. She sat back on the bed and tried to rationalize. Old houses make noise. Floorboards shift. Air currents. Nothing weird. But that night, sleep came only in small fits. And every time her eyes closed, she saw the rocking chair. Moving. Waiting. Morning came gray and cold. Clara opened the curtains expecting sun, but a thick fog smothered the trees beyond the glass. The forest looked more like a faded photograph than a real landscape. Her breath fogged the window. She felt a chill that didn't belong to the weather. She washed up in the tiny bathroom, splashing cold water on her face and avoiding the cracked mirror above the sink. But when she finally looked, she noticed something that made her heart skip. There was writing on the glass. Faint. Scrawled in the steam. "You came back." Clara staggered back. The bathroom was empty. The air was still. No one could have written it. Not unless. She grabbed her phone but remembered she'd left it off per her therapist's orders. She reached for a towel and wiped the mirror clean. The message vanished, leaving only her wide eyes staring back. Downstairs, she made coffee in a dusty machine that groaned like it resented being woken. She sat at the wooden kitchen table and tried to convince herself she was imagining things. The footsteps, the moving chair, the words on the mirror. All of it. Sleep deprivation makes your brain lie to you, she told herself. But the feeling didn't fade. It followed her through the creaky halls, clung to her like perfume. That afternoon, while exploring the hallway closet, she found something strange wedged behind a stack of old board games, a photograph in a silver frame. It was her room. Same wallpaper. Same bed. But there was someone sitting in the rocking chair. A woman in a nightgown. Hair loose over her shoulders. Face turned toward the window. Clara turned the photo over. In delicate cursive, faded by time. Margaret, just before she disappeared. Grayson House, 1962. Clara placed the photograph on the kitchen counter, careful not to look too long at Margaret's pale face. Her hand lingered on the frame as she tried to recall what she knew about the Grayson house. Nothing in the listing mentioned any disappearances, or hauntings. She paced the hallway, her thoughts swimming. Each room seemed to hum with anticipation, as though the house was waiting for her to acknowledge something it already knew. That's when she heard it. Tick. 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 A clock. Somewhere upstairs. She paused at the base of the staircase, listening. The ticking grew louder. Steady. Rhythmic. But there were no clocks in the house. Not that she'd seen. Not even in her room. Clara followed the sound to the end of the hall. The second bedroom on the left. One she hadn't entered yet. She turned the knob. The room smelled like dust and mothballs. A sheet covered an armchair, and faded curtains let in pale, shapeless light. But there, sitting atop a delicate wooden dresser, was an old wind-up mantel clock. It ticked steadily. Clara approached it, frowning. The hands were frozen at 3:17. The key to wind it sat untouched beside it. Still, it ticked. She reached out and lifted the glass casing. The ticking stopped instantly. And from behind her, a whisper slithered through the still air. That's when she left. Clara spun. No one. She backed out of the room, heart pounding, and shut the door with trembling fingers. It was only after she'd returned to her bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed that she realized. The chair was rocking again. The day dragged slowly. Clara kept every light on, every curtain open. But the fog outside never lifted, and neither did the weight in her chest. She tried reading, journaling, even meditating, but the tension kept building, like a storm tightening around the old house. By late afternoon, she couldn't ignore it anymore. The whispers had returned. They were soft, too faint to catch full sentences, but always there. Behind walls. Beneath the floor. In the humming of the light bulbs and the rustling of unseen paper. She sat in the center of the bedroom, hugging her knees. This is a stress response. It's not real, she told herself. Then came the thud. Directly beneath her. A single knock. Hollow. Measured. Like someone had tapped once on the floor from inside the house's bones. Clara stood, eyes fixed on the floorboards. She walked slowly toward the area near the rocking chair. Another thud sounded, fainter now, but certain. She dropped to her knees and placed her ear to the floor. Silence. And then. Whispering. A cluster of voices, overlapping and distant, like a conversation trapped in the walls. One stood out, clear as crystal and close as breath. She walks while she sleeps. Clara jumped back, hitting the rocking chair. It creaked sharply, then stopped. Suddenly, she remembered something she hadn't considered before. She used to sleepwalk as a child. Badly. Night terrors. Locked doors opened. Furniture moved. But she hadn't had an episode in years. Not since. Clara stared at the door, her skin prickling. Had she locked it last night? She couldn't remember. That evening, Clara forced herself to stay awake. She brewed coffee, paced the hallways, and kept the television on in the den, even though it only played static. Sleep felt dangerous now, like surrendering a piece of herself to the house. The whispers had stopped, but something worse replaced them, a silence that rang in her ears. She couldn't even hear birds or wind through the trees. The world had gone unnaturally still. By midnight, she sat in the living room beneath the pale-eyed portrait of Margaret Grayson, flipping absently through an old Reader's Digest. But her thoughts were elsewhere, on the footsteps, the rocking chair, the ticking clock that wasn't wound. Then came the sound. Scratch. Right at the edge of the windowpane. Clara whipped around. A second scratch followed, longer this time, like a nail drawn slowly across the glass. She crept to the window, careful not to breathe too loudly. Beyond the smudged glass was nothing but darkness and mist. But there, just barely, she caught a glimpse of a silhouette. It stood still in the fog. A woman, tall and motionless, with her hand raised to the window. Though impossible, Clara could sense her face. Hollow eyes. Slack mouth. Hair tangled like vines. Clara staggered back. The scratching stopped. The woman did not. Frozen in place, the figure stood at the edge of the woods, staring into the house. Clara reached for her phone, but it was dead. Not out of battery. Just, dead. She backed away from the window and turned toward the staircase. At the top stood the same silhouette, now inside. Waiting. Clara didn't remember running. One moment, the figure was at the top of the stairs, the next, she was in the kitchen, hunched behind the counter, gasping for breath. Her skin was cold with sweat, and her hands trembled violently. Had she seen the woman clearly? No. But she felt her presence, the same heaviness that haunted the mirror, the rocking chair, and the ticking clock. A presence that seemed to belong to the house as much as the dust and wood. The floor above creaked once. Twice. She held her breath. Footsteps began to move slowly overhead, pacing along the hallway near her room. They weren't random, they followed a pattern, repeating the same short path over and over again. Back and forth. Back and forth. Like sleepwalking, Clara thought. Like rehearsing. She waited until the steps stopped. Then came a different sound, something dragging across the floor, like fabric or fingernails or both. She fled. The front door wouldn't budge. She yanked at it again and again, but it refused to open. She even tried the windows. Nailed shut. Every one. Panicked, she grabbed her coat and ran into the basement, hoping for a back exit or some hidden path. What she found instead was worse. The basement floor was dirt. Damp. Uneven. In one corner, wooden planks had been pulled up. A narrow hole opened beneath them, barely wide enough for a person to slip through. A faint breeze stirred from within. Above the hole, someone had scrawled words in the dirt wall. She comes from the woods. As Clara backed away, something rustled behind her. The trees outside were no longer still. They were moving. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat on the basement steps, flashlight in one hand, a fireplace poker in the other. Her eyes stayed locked on the narrow opening in the earth. Nothing emerged, but the air that drifted out of it was colder than the rest of the basement, and it smelled of rot and moss. By sunrise, the fog outside had lightened just enough to see the trees, only now, they looked closer. Too close. The forest line had moved, encroaching nearly to the house's back porch. Clara returned upstairs. She needed answers. The house didn't feel haunted, it felt alive, and it was watching her. In the living room, her gaze fell on the bookshelf built into the wall. It was the one thing she hadn't truly explored. Dozens of old books leaned crooked on dusty shelves. Most were local histories, old romances, collections of faded poetry, but one volume was wedged oddly sideways, too deep in the shelf. She pulled it. With a soft clunk, the bookshelf shifted. A door. Behind it, a narrow stairwell wound down into darkness, deeper than the basement she'd seen. The air that rose up was damp, old, and filled with something more than dust. Clara hesitated, then grabbed her flashlight and stepped through. The steps creaked. The wooden walls grew damp with every turn. After several minutes, the stairwell ended in a small stone chamber, half submerged in shallow, cold water. Runes had been carved into the walls, spirals, symbols, and one name repeated over and over again. Margaret. In the center stood a child's bed frame. Rusted. Rotten. Clara's breath caught as her light passed over the wall beyond it. Drawings. Stick figures. Trees. A house. A girl sleepwalking through every scene. In the last one, the girl stood at the edge of the forest, her arms open as if welcoming something from the trees. And below it, scrawled in red chalk. She finally heard me. Clara stumbled backward, her breath fogging in the cold, wet air of the chamber. The stick figure drawings on the wall burned into her memory, especially the one with the girl at the forest's edge, arms open wide, head tilted toward the dark. She turned and climbed the stairs in a rush, slipping once on a damp step. When she emerged into the living room, her flashlight flickered and died completely. The house was quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. The kind that pressed in around her ears, like sound had been sucked out of the air. She replaced the book on the shelf, and the hidden door clicked shut behind her. That's when she noticed something new in her bedroom. The wallpaper was different. It had always been a faded blue with thin, curling vines. But now, deep within the pattern, barely visible, was the outline of a figure. A woman. The vines twisted around her, pulling her arms upward as though in worship or surrender. Her eyes were black dots, empty and deep. The longer Clara stared, the more detailed the figure became. It was almost like the paper had changed while she was in the passageway. She leaned in, tracing the faint lines with her fingertips. And then, the woman blinked. Clara stumbled backward into the dresser. The mirror shook and a drawer popped open on impact. Inside was a brittle journal bound with ribbon. She opened it to the first page. Margaret Grayson. October 1959. Her fingers trembled as she turned to the last page written in that same loopy script. The forest watches. The house remembers. I walk in my sleep now. But soon, I'll walk when I'm awake. If you find this, don't listen to her voice. Don't believe what she says. She wears my skin, but she is not me. Clara sat on the floor for what felt like hours, the journal open in her lap, Margaret's final words echoing in her mind. She wears my skin, but she is not me. The house creaked overhead. Not a random sound, but a long, deliberate groan, like the beams were shifting, stretching, breathing. Clara stood slowly, heart hammering in her chest. She moved through the hallway, listening. The breathing grew louder. Each inhale seemed to come from the walls themselves, deep and wet, like lungs filled with soil and fog. Then came the exhale, low and mournful, carrying with it the faint sound of weeping. Clara froze. The crying was coming from the room across the hall. The door to it had been shut since she arrived. She had never tried the handle. Never needed to. Until now. Her hand reached for the knob, hesitated, then turned. The room was pitch dark. Her flashlight was dead, and the overhead bulb buzzed but never lit. The air inside smelled like damp leaves and something older, earthy, rotten. Then, her foot stepped on something soft. Fabric. A nightgown. She knelt and ran her hands along the floor, following the edge of it. There was a body. A woman, curled on her side, facing the wall. Margaret? Clara whispered. The body trembled. The woman sat up slowly, but didn't turn. Clara's voice caught in her throat. Are you okay? The woman nodded once. Then her head twisted around in a sickening, unnatural arc, all the way around, her neck popping with each rotation. Her face was Margaret's. But the eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too black. And they were smiling. Clara stumbled back, nearly tripping over the nightgown again. The smile stretched impossibly wide across Margaret's face, an expression that no living person could wear. The eyes gleamed like empty pits, sucking in every scrap of light in the room. "Who are you?" Clara's voice was barely a whisper, trembling with fear. The thing, Margaret's hollow shell, tilted her head, mimicking curiosity. Then she spoke, voice dripping with something both familiar and alien. "She took me. Took everything from me. Now, I wear her skin. But I am not her." Clara's breath caught. The words echoed the final lines in the journal. The creature pushed itself up from the floor, joints cracking as if the body had been frozen in time too long. It took a step toward Clara, slow, deliberate. "I was trapped inside the house," it said, "a prisoner in the shadows. But she escaped by leaving me behind. You came looking for answers. Now, you will stay." Clara's eyes darted to the window. Outside, the night was thick with fog, swallowing the house whole. No way out. Desperation clawed at her chest as she realized the truth: the house was alive, and it fed on those who tried to unravel its secrets. Margaret's spirit was trapped, her skin stolen by something ancient and hungry. "Please," Clara begged, "how do I help you? How do I stop this?" The creature smiled again, the darkness in its eyes deepening. "By understanding who I am. By remembering the price of this place." It reached into its chest and pulled out the tattered journal Clara had been holding. The pages fluttered, revealing a new entry, one written in a hand both familiar and twisted. Clara leaned in, reading aloud. "The skin is a mask, but the soul is the prison. Break the chain, or become the next." The house groaned louder, shaking as if angered by the revelation. Clara gripped the journal tight. "I won't become you," she vowed. The room's shadows writhed, and the creature lunged. But Clara was ready. She slammed the journal shut and held it like a shield. A burst of cold air surged through the room, the creature's form flickering. Then, a piercing scream shattered the silence as the thing dissolved into smoke, leaving only Margaret's trembling body behind. Margaret collapsed, crying real tears this time. Clara helped her up, holding her close. "We'll leave," Clara promised. "Together." Outside, the fog thinned, and the first light of dawn kissed the horizon. The house stood silent, its hunger momentarily sated, for now. Story 2. Evelyn's hands trembled as she turned the key in the rusted lock of the abandoned theater. The marquee above flickered weakly, the letters barely legible, "The Rosewood Playhouse." Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Velvet curtains hung in tatters, and shattered glass crunched beneath her boots. She shone her flashlight around, the beam catching glimpses of empty seats and a cracked stage. She wasn't supposed to be here. But the letter she'd found at her grandmother's house, written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand, had drawn her in. Find the truth behind the final act. They're still waiting. A chill crawled up Evelyn's spine. The theater's silence was broken by the faint sound of music, an old, haunting melody played on a piano somewhere deep inside. She followed it, heart pounding. The backstage door creaked open before she could touch it. "Come on in, Evelyn." The voice was soft, but icy. She stepped into the wings and found herself face to face with a man dressed in an outdated tuxedo. His skin was pale as porcelain, his eyes dark hollows. "You came," he said, bowing slightly. "We've been waiting for a new audience." Evelyn's breath caught. "Who are you?" "The cast. The final performance never ended. And now, you're part of it." Behind him, shadows shifted into the shapes of actors frozen in time, silent, eyes wide with dread. Why? She asked. Because the show must go on. Suddenly, the stage lights blazed on, revealing the theater filled with ghostly figures, all staring at her. The music swelled, and the curtains drew open. Evelyn realized too late that the play wasn't for the living. Evelyn's heart pounded as the stage lights illuminated the rows of ghostly faces, pale, hollow-eyed, mouths frozen in silent screams and wide, desperate grins. They were the lost souls trapped in the play, the cast that never left. The man in the tuxedo stepped forward, his voice smooth but cold. You must perform, Evelyn. The final act requires a lead. She shook her head, backing away, but the floor beneath her creaked, as if alive, bending the path forward toward the stage. No, she whispered. I don't understand. What happened here? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Long ago, the Rosewood Playhouse hosted a spectacular show, one that broke all records. But on opening night, the lead actress vanished during the final scene. The audience never left, and the curtain never fell. Evelyn swallowed hard. They're trapped. They are cursed to repeat the last performance, unable to leave until someone takes the final bow. The music surged louder, now a chilling waltz echoing from the piano in the shadows. The other actors slowly began to move, gliding toward her like marionettes on invisible strings. Evelyn's legs felt heavy. The stage was no longer just a platform, it was a cage closing around her. Please, she begged, tears welling in her eyes. There has to be another way. The tuxedoed man's smile twisted, showing sharp teeth. Only the one who finishes the play can break the cycle. But beware, the role comes with a price. The shadows of the cast surrounded her, whispering lines from a script she didn't know, their voices blending into a haunting chorus. Evelyn's fingers brushed a dusty script lying on the podium. The pages were filled with words that shifted under her gaze, demanding her name be written on the final page. She hesitated but knew the truth. Escape meant surrendering herself to the play, becoming part of the never-ending performance. With trembling hands, Evelyn took the pen. The theater held its breath. The final act was about to begin. Evelyn's hand shook as she gripped the pen, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like the heavy velvet curtains around the stage. The script's pages seemed to ripple, words rearranging themselves until only one phrase remained clear. The lead must take the final bow. Her name appeared on the last page in ink as black as the abyss. The room's temperature dropped sharply. The ghostly actors closed in, their eyes pleading and accusing all at once. The tuxedoed man stepped behind her, whispering, "Once you finish, you'll join us forever." Evelyn swallowed her fear and stepped onto the stage. Spotlights flickered on, blinding and cold. The audience, phantoms trapped in eternal silence, leaned forward. Her voice trembled as she began reciting lines she'd never learned, but somehow knew. The words twisted her tongue like thorns. As she spoke, the shadows around her thickened, tendrils creeping up from the floor, coiling around her ankles, pulling tight. Her reflection appeared in the polished grand piano's black surface, her eyes slowly darkening, pupils widening into endless voids. She tried to scream but only heard echoes of applause, hollow and mocking. The final scene approached, a dance with the tuxedoed man, a grotesque waltz that bound her tighter to the cursed play. With one last shuddering breath, Evelyn bowed deeply. The theater shook violently. Light burst from the stage, and then, silence. Evelyn opened her eyes. The theater was empty, dust motes drifting in the shafts of morning sun. But in the reflection of the piano, another figure stood beside her. The tuxedoed man smiled. The script lay open on the podium. And a new name appeared on the final page. Evelyn's heart raced as she stared into the piano's glossy black surface. The figure beside her, the tuxedoed man, was no longer just a shadow. His eyes gleamed with triumph, and his smile was colder than the grave. "Welcome to the cast," he whispered, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. She tried to move, but the theater itself seemed to bind her in place. The velvet curtains closed around her, swallowing her whole. Behind the glassy piano lid, Evelyn saw the audience. Rows of ghostly faces turned to her, their eyes filled with endless sorrow. Her breath fogged the piano's surface, and her reflection twisted, becoming one of them, an actor trapped forever. Outside, the sun rose over the rosewood playhouse. Its sign flickered weakly, a new message glowing faintly in the dawn light. Now showing, the final act. And somewhere deep in the theater, a new melody began, a piano's mournful song that no living soul could hear. The show would go on. Forever. Story 3. Lucas found the small, weathered box buried beneath the floorboards of his new home. The latch was rusty, but it gave way with a soft creak. Inside, wrapped in brittle cloth, lay a set of old photographs and a small, cracked mirror. The photographs showed a family, smiling faces frozen in time. But the eyes in every picture were scratched out, erased like a terrible secret. Lucas turned the mirror over in his hands, its surface dull except for one patch that shimmered oddly. He caught his own reflection, only his eyes were missing. A cold breath brushed his neck. He spun around, but the room was empty. Yet the mirror's surface rippled, like dark water disturbed by a stone. Whispers seeped from the cracks in the walls, voices calling his name in tones both pleading and cruel. He tried to set the mirror down, but it clung to his fingers as if alive. Suddenly, his reflection smiled, an expression Lucas wasn't making. The mirror's glass began to ripple, revealing another room. In it, a figure crouched, eyes wide and hollow. "Help me," it mouthed. Lucas felt a pull, like icy fingers tugging at his soul. He tried to look away, but the mirror's grip tightened. He was not alone. Something in the house wore his face, and it was waiting for him to disappear. Lucas's breath hitched as the mirror's surface shimmered like dark water, pulling him closer with invisible force. The figure inside crouched still, its hollow eyes begging silently for rescue. "Who are you?" Lucas whispered, voice trembling. The reflection's lips moved again, forming a single word, trapped. Suddenly, the room around Lucas seemed to warp. The walls stretched and warped, shadows lengthening and twisting like creeping fingers. The air grew thick and cold, smelling of damp earth and decay. His grip tightened on the mirror, but it pulled harder, as if dragging him through some unseen portal. With a shuddering gasp, Lucas found himself no longer in his house, but in a dark, endless corridor lined with cracked mirrors, each reflecting a different, distorted version of himself. Some smiled wickedly, others wept silent tears. From behind, a soft, scraping sound echoed, the slow, deliberate footsteps of something unseen. Panic rising, Lucas ran, but the mirrors multiplied, labyrinthine and endless. Then, from one cracked pane, the figure emerged, no longer crouched but standing tall, wearing Lucas's face with a twisted grin. "You can join us," it hissed, voice echoing with many layered tones. Lucas's reflection in a nearby mirror no longer looked like him. The eyes were black voids, and the smile was all teeth. The corridor seemed to close in. He understood then, this was the prison. The house's true curse. To become a face in the mirrors, lost and forgotten forever. Lucas's scream was swallowed by the darkness as the mirrors cracked one by one, trapping him inside their haunted depths. Outside, the old house stood silent and still. Waiting. Lucas's heart pounded as the black-eyed reflection stepped closer, its grin widening impossibly. The corridor's mirrors began to ripple and fracture, shards falling like rain, but none breaking free. He backed into a corner, the cold creeping through his skin like ice. The footsteps closed in, silent but relentless. A voice echoed, half his own, half something ancient and hollow. "You took what was not yours. Now, you belong to the house." Desperation surged. Lucas slammed his fist against one mirror pane, and it cracked, sharp and deep. Light spilled through the fissure, a glimpse of his real room. Summoning every ounce of will, he reached through the crack, fingers brushing cold glass. The figure snarled, recoiling, but the corridor trembled violently. With a sudden, wrenching pull, Lucas was yanked back into his own home. He collapsed on the wooden floor, gasping for breath. The mirror lay shattered beside him. The photographs with scratched-out eyes were gone. For a moment, all was silent. Then, faintly, a whisper. "She wears my skin, but she is not me." Lucas looked up, heart still hammering. The house seemed to breathe around him, alive, hungry, waiting. He knew one thing. The nightmare wasn't over. It never ends.